Step away from the truck. Now, hands up.
My hands are visible, officer. This is my house.
Don't argue with me. Get on the ground.
That is not a lawful order. My ID and the deed are right there.
Turn around. You're resisting.
I am a retired Marine. You are making a very expensive mistake.
Officer Derek Vance had been patrolling the quiet, tree-lined streets of the Gables for less than 6 months when he made the decision that would end his career, bankrupt his precinct, and cost the city of Marietta, Georgia, $6.5 million. He was 28 years old, aggressive, and entirely convinced that his instinct for spotting criminals was flawless. On a bright Tuesday morning, beneath the sprawling oaks of an exclusive subdivision, he received a dispatch call about a burglary in progress. The suspect, a black man moving high-end electronics and furniture into a rental truck. The suspect was Master Sergeant Elias Thorne, retired a 58-year-old decorated Marine Scout sniper who had served his country for 3 decades. He was simply moving into the home he had purchased with his life savings. What Officer Vance did next, ignoring property deeds, dismissing valid identification, and assaulting a disabled veteran in front of his new neighbors, would become a terrifying case study in how unchecked bias and aggressive policing can shatter the American dream. Before we dive into this story, where are you folks tuning in from? If you believe that a man's home is his castle and that the Constitution still matters, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We need to keep telling these stories until the system changes. The Gables is the kind of neighborhood where the lawns are manicured with surgical precision and the silence is heavy with money. It sits on the outskirts of Atlanta, a sanctuary of brick colonials and winding driveways populated by judges, doctors, and retired executives. It was 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. The air was crisp, the sky a piercing blue. The neighborhood was mostly empty, with residents away at their offices or country clubs. But at the end of Sycamore Court, there was activity. A large yellow Penske rental truck was backed up the long paved driveway of number 412. The house was a majestic structure, 4 bedrooms, sprawling porch built in the early 90s. Elias Thorne had closed on the property 48 hours prior. He had spent the morning carefully unloading the final items from his storage unit, a hand-carved mahogany desk, several framed commendations from the Department of Defense, and his collection of vintage jazz records. Elias Thorne was a man who moved with deliberate economic grace. At 58, he kept his hair high and tight, a habit from 30 years in the Corps. He stood 6'2", his broad shoulders slightly stooped from years of carrying a ruck. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He had spent his career in the shadows, a scout sniper who had operated in Panama, the Gulf, and Afghanistan. He learned patience in the jungle and discipline in the desert. He was a man who valued order. He was wearing a gray USMC t-shirt tucked into work jeans and sturdy boots. He looked exactly like what he was, a man doing hard work on his own property. He had chosen the Gables for its safety, a place where he could finally exhale after decades on high alert. He wanted peace. He wanted to drink his coffee on that porch and listen to the birds. He had no idea that his presence alone was enough to trigger a chain reaction that would bring violence to his doorstep. Across the street behind the silk curtains of number 415, Julian Priest was watching. Julian was 34 years old, the treasurer of the Homeowners Association, and a man with too much time on his hands. He had inherited his father's logistics company and the house, but he possessed none of his father's work ethic. Julian spent his days day trading on 3 monitors and patrolling the neighborhood Facebook group for infractions. He was the type of man who measured grass height with a ruler and reported garbage cans left out 10 minutes past pickup. He was deeply protective of the character of the Gables. And this morning, Julian Priest saw something that didn't fit his narrative. He saw a black man, muscular and sweating, moving expensive items out of the truck and into the garage. No, Julian decided he was seeing it wrong. In his mind, the truck was positioned to hide the license plate. The man was moving too fast. He must be looting the place. The for sale sign had been taken down yesterday, but Julian hadn't met the new owners yet. And surely, in Julian's limited worldview, the new owner of the 4-bedroom colonial wouldn't be doing his own moving, and he certainly wouldn't look like Elias Thorne. Julian watched for 5 minutes, his heart rate climbing with a mix of fear and excitement. He felt like a guardian at the gate. He didn't walk across the street to say hello. He didn't wave. He didn't check the neighborhood registry, which had been updated that morning with the name Thorne. Instead, Julian Priest pulled out his iPhone, dialed 911, and initiated a sequence of events that would ruin lives. 911, what is your emergency? The operator's voice was calm. Yes, this is Julian Priest at 415 Sycamore Court. There's a burglary in progress across the street at 412. The operator typed quickly. Are you sure it's a burglary, sir? Do you see weapons? Julian hesitated, then embellished. I see a large man, African-American, backing a truck into the garage. He's taking things. He looks aggressive. I think he might have a crowbar. You need to send someone now before he cleans the place out. The call was dispatched with a high-priority code burglary in progress potential weapon involved. Officer Derek Vance heard the call crackle over his radio and felt a surge of adrenaline. Vance was 28 years old, a 5-year veteran of the force who had transferred from a rougher precinct in downtown Atlanta to the suburbs looking for better pay and more respect. But respect for Derek Vance was a one-way street. He demanded it, but rarely gave it. His personnel file was a minefield of red flags that had been carefully ignored by a department desperate for bodies. There were 7 citizen complaints in 5 years, 4 for verbal abuse, 2 for excessive force, and 1 for an unlawful search of a vehicle. In every instance, Vance had argued that he felt threatened, or that the subjects were non-compliant. The internal affairs investigations had been cursory, resulting in 2 days of suspension and a mandatory seminar on de-escalation that Vance had spent scrolling through his phone. Vance believed in the warrior cop ethos. He viewed every interaction as a potential ambush. He didn't see himself as a public servant. He saw himself as a soldier in enemy territory, even here among the manicured lawns of the Gables. When the dispatch came through, burglary in progress 412, Sycamore subject is a black male possibly armed with a crowbar. Vance didn't hear possibly. He heard threat. He didn't consider that a burglar usually doesn't park a bright yellow Penske truck in the driveway at 10:30 in the morning. He didn't consider that burglars rarely wear T-shirts identifying their military branch. He simply hit the lights, cut the siren to maintain the element of surprise, and floored the accelerator of his Dodge Charger. He was going to catch a felon. He was going to be the hero. He arrived at the Gables 3 minutes later, tires screeching slightly as he turned onto Sycamore Court. He saw the truck. He saw the man, and his hand immediately went to the retention strap of his holster. Elias Thorne had just set down a heavy box of books on the driveway. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand and checked his clipboard. He was marking off the inventory methodical as always. He had the deed to the house, his driver's license, and his concealed carry permit in a plastic folder resting on the bumper of the truck right next to where he was standing. He liked to keep his paperwork handy during a move. He heard the cruiser before he saw it, the aggressive growl of the engine. He looked up, expecting perhaps a neighbor or a delivery driver. Instead, he saw a police cruiser skid to a halt at the foot of his driveway, blocking him in. He didn't panic. He had been in combat zones. A police car in a suburb didn't frighten him. He assumed the officer was looking for directions. Elias stood straight, putting on his parade rest face, waiting for the officer to speak. He watched as a young white officer, sunglasses on, slammed the car door and marched up the driveway, hand hovering near his gun. "Get away from the truck." "Now!" Vance shouted, closing the distance rapidly. Elias blinked, confused, but calm. "Excuse me, officer. Can I help you?" He didn't move. He knew that sudden movements around jumpy men with guns were a bad idea. "I said step away from the truck. Get your hands where I can see them." Vance's voice was cracking with intensity. Elias slowly raised his hands to chest-level, palms open. "Officer, my hands are visible. I am the homeowner. I'm moving in." Vance didn't hear him. Or rather, he chose not to process the information. The dispatch said burglary. The neighbor said burglary. This man didn't look like he belonged in $1 million home. "I'm not going to ask you again. Get on the ground." Vance was now 10 feet away, entering Elias's personal space. Elias held his ground. "I am not getting on the ground, son. I have bad knees and I live here. My identification and the deed to this house are right there on the bumper 3 feet from you. If you just look..." "Don't you tell me what to do." Vance snapped, his ego bruised by the older man's calm authority. "You're failing to comply with a lawful order." "It is not a lawful order if I am on my own property and breaking no law," Elias said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of a master sergeant dressing down a subordinate. "I am Master Sergeant Elias Thorne, USMC, retired. I bought this house on Tuesday. Look at the paperwork." Vance glanced at the folder on the bumper but didn't open it. He saw it as a distraction, a trick. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Vance lunged forward, grabbing Elias's left wrist. Elias didn't flinch, but his muscles locked up instinctively. He was trained to react to aggression, but he forced himself to override decades of combat programming. He knew that if he fought back, he would die. "You are making a mistake," Elias said, looking Vance in the eye. "A very expensive mistake." Vance didn't care about mistakes. He cared about dominance. He twisted Elias's arm behind his back with unnecessary force, leveraging the older man's shoulder joint. Elias grimaced, but didn't cry out. He had felt worse pain than this. "Stop resisting," Vance screamed for the benefit of the body camera despite Elias standing perfectly still. "I am not resisting," Elias stated clearly, speaking to the camera he knew was recording. "I am complying under duress. You are hurting a disabled veteran on his own property." By now, the commotion had drawn attention. Not just Julian Preece, who was peeking through his blinds, but other neighbors. Mrs. Gable, a retired judge 2 doors down, had come out to her porch. Mr. Henderson, a 60-year-old architect, was walking his dog. They stopped. They watched. Mr. Henderson pulled out his phone. "Officer," Henderson called out from the sidewalk, "that man has been unloading that truck all morning. He has a key to the front door." Vance ignored the witness. He kicked Elias's legs apart, forcing the older man to buckle slightly, his face pressing against the dirty side of the rental truck. Vance pulled his handcuffs from his belt. Click, click. The steel bit into Elias's wrists. Vance tightened them aggressively, ensuring they pinched the nerve. "You're under arrest for burglary, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct." Elias took a deep breath, smelling the aluminum of the truck and the sweat of the officer. "Check my back pocket," Elias said, his voice like grinding stones. "My wallet is there. My ID has this address on it. The keys to this house are in my front pocket. If you take me in without checking, you are ending your career." Vance laughed a short, nervous bark. "We'll sort it out downtown. You're taking a ride." He shoved Elias toward the cruiser, marching him down the driveway he had just bought. Elias walked with his head up, scanning the neighbors, making eye contact with Mr. Henderson, who was recording. "Document this," Elias said to the neighbor. "Please." Vance shoved Elias into the back of the Dodge Charger. The space was cramped, the plastic seat hard. Elias had to twist his body to accommodate his stiff knees. Vance slammed the door, silence finally descending as the heavy glass sealed shut. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, controlling his breathing. Box breathing. In for 4, hold for 4. Out for 4. He wasn't scared. He was furious. But fury was a cold thing for a sniper, not a hot one. He watched through the partition as Vance got into the driver's seat, breathing heavily, pumped full of adrenaline and righteousness. Vance radioed in. "Suspect in custody. 1 male, non-compliant. Scene secure." The drive to the precinct took 20 minutes. Vance played loud rock music, perhaps to drown out the silence from the back seat, or perhaps to celebrate his catch. Elias spent the time memorizing the officer's name tag, his unit number, and the time of day. He was building his after-action report. When they arrived at the precinct, Vance pulled Elias out of the car, parading him through the sally port. He wanted the booking officers to see his collar. They walked into the intake area where the air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Behind the high desk sat Desk Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 62, a Vietnam veteran who had seen everything and was 2 years from retirement. He was reading a report when Vance walked in pushing a handcuffed Elias Thorne ahead of him. Miller looked up his eyes, scanning the scene. He saw Vance sweaty and smug. Then he saw the prisoner. He saw the USMC t-shirt. He saw the gray haircut. He saw the bearing, straight-back eyes, forward, silent dignity. And he saw the way the man's hands were cuffed behind him, wrists swelling. Miller stood up slowly. "Vance," Miller grunted. "What do you have here?" "Burglary in progress at the Gables," Vance announced proudly. "Caught him loading a truck. Neighbors called it in. Resisted arrest. Refused to identify." Elias spoke then. His voice filled the room, calm and commanding. "Sergeant, I am Master Sergeant Elias Thorne. I requested Officer Vance check my identification in my back pocket. He refused. I requested he look at the deed to the home which was on the bumper of my truck. He refused. I am the owner of 412 Sycamore Court. I have the keys in my pocket." The room went deathly silent. Sergeant Miller looked at Vance. "Did you check his ID?" Vance scoffed. "He wouldn't get on the ground, Sarge. He was aggressive. I secured the scene." Miller walked around the desk. He didn't look at Vance. He walked straight to Elias. "Turn around, Marine," Miller said softly. He reached into Elias's back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. He opened it. He looked at the Georgia driver's license. He looked at the VA card. He looked at the retired military ID. Miller looked at the address on the license. It was a temporary sticker on the back, updated 2 days ago, 412 Sycamore Court. Miller closed the wallet. He looked at Vance with a look that could peel paint off a wall. "Vance, give me your keys." Vance blinked. "What?" "Uncuff him. Now." Miller's voice was a low growl. "But Sarge, You arrested a homeowner for moving into his own house because you were too lazy to check an ID." Miller roared, the sound echoing off the cinder blocks. "Uncuff him." Vance's hands shook as he reached for his keys. The realization was just starting to hit him. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold knot of dread. He unlocked the cuffs. Elias rubbed his wrists, looking at the deep red indentations. He turned to Miller. "Thank you, Sergeant." Then he turned to Vance. "I want your badge number. I want your lieutenant. And I want a lawyer." The fallout was instantaneous. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a catastrophe. Within an hour, the Bodycam footage was being reviewed by the captain. The video showed everything. Elias standing calmly, the paperwork visible on the bumper, Vance's immediate aggression, the refusal to look at evidence. It was indefensible. But what made it nuclear was the video from Mr. Henderson across the street. He had uploaded it to Nextdoor and Twitter within minutes of the arrest. #veteran arrested, #profiling, #the Gables. By the time Elias was formally released with a profuse apology from the chief of police himself, the video had 2 million views. The image of a white officer twisting the arms of a black Marine standing next to a U-Haul in a wealthy driveway became the lead story on CNN that evening. "This is what it looks like," one commentator said. "You can serve your country, save your money, buy the big house, and you are still just a suspect to the people paid to protect you." The lawsuit filed by Elias Thorne's attorney, a shark from downtown Atlanta named Marcus Sterling, was a masterpiece of civil litigation. It named Officer Derek Vance, the city of Marietta, and specifically Julian Preece for the false report. The claims were numerous. False imprisonment assault, battery violation of Fourth Amendment rights, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The city attorneys took one look at the deposition of Officer Vance, where he admitted he didn't think a black man would own that house, and told the mayor to settle immediately. There was no defense. Vance was fired 4 weeks after the incident. The internal investigation revealed he had violated 6 department policies in the first 3 minutes of the encounter. He was stripped of his certification, ensuring he would never wear a badge again in the state of Georgia. Julian Priest didn't escape unscathed. While citizens are rarely charged for 911 calls, the civil suit destroyed him. Elias sued him for defamation and malicious prosecution. During discovery, Priest's text messages to a friend were revealed. "Some thug is robbing the place across the street. Gonna get him busted." The "thug" comment, combined with the fact that Elias was clearly moving furniture in, proved malice. Priest settled for an undisclosed amount, but rumors in the Gables put it in the mid-6 figures. He sold his house 3 months later and moved away, unable to bear the glares of his neighbors, who now knew exactly who he was. The city settled with Master Sergeant Elias Thorne for $6.5 million. It was the largest police misconduct settlement in the county's history. But for Elias, it wasn't about the money. He donated a significant portion to a legal defense fund for veterans wrongfully accused of crimes. He finally moved into 412 Sycamore Court. He finished unpacking his books. He set up his office, and every morning he sat on his porch drinking his coffee, watching the sun come up over the neighborhood that had tried to reject him. Officer Vance is now a security guard at a mall in Alabama. He tells people he was screwed by politics. He still doesn't get it, but the system that protected him for 5 years finally broke under the weight of undeniable video evidence and a victim who knew his rights. Elias Thorne stood his ground, not with a weapon, but with the quiet, unshakable dignity of a man who knows exactly who he is. The sad truth is, if Elias had been a younger man, or a man who panicked, or a man who didn't know the law, he might be dead. He survived because he was exceptional. But you shouldn't have to be an exceptional Marine sniper to survive moving into your own home. You shouldn't have to have a badge in your pocket to be treated like a citizen. Why do we keep hiring officers who see the public as the enemy? Do you think officers should carry personal liability insurance for misconduct lawsuits instead of taxpayers footing the bill? Let me know in the comments below. Elias Thorne is enjoying his retirement now. The neighbors love him. Mr. Henderson and he play chess on Tuesdays. The Gables is quiet again. But every time a police cruiser rolls slowly down Sycamore Court, the residents watch closely. They remember. They know that safety isn't just about keeping criminals out. It's about making sure the people we call for help don't become the danger. Justice was served, but the scar remains. If this story moved you, if you believe in accountability and truth, please like this video and share it. It helps us bring these stories to light. Until next time, stay safe, know your rights, and watch out for your neighbors.